No mai, haere mai. Welcome to the Maxim Institute podcast. My name is Jason, and I'm the Communications Manager at Maxim Institute. This is our weekly short-form podcast. These podcasts are released in tandem with our weekly column and are a chance for you to hear in depth from the column's author about some of the thinking that went into producing their final piece. Today we talk to Executive Director Tim Wilson about his latest column. Tim, it's good to have you on the podcast, mate.
Kia ora, good to be here.
We're talking about your column, latest column for Maxim, The Conspiracy Theory Olympics. Interesting title. Maybe before we get into the meat of it, what is a conspiracy theory?
Conspiracy theory is a view of say, an event or a situation that's held by a group of people that isn't supported by the facts. So, for example, there was a conspiracy theory after 9/11 that it was an inside job by the US government to provoke a war that they always wanted. I lived in America for 11 years, and I can promise you the federal government could not organize a booze up in a brewery, much less an inside terror job. But I spoke with some people who believed that when I was a journalist. So that's
So things kind of like that. Elvis is not dead.
Yeah.
The rulers of the world are actually lizard people.
That kind of thing. And these are readily dismissible. But I think the charge of a conspiracy theory, or it's what it really means is incorrect thinking, and what below that it means these are unacceptable people. So for example, we heard that the parliamentary protests about vaccine mandates, that they were actually organised by white supremacists. Well, the observation has been made many times, but for white supremacists, those guys did a pretty good haka.
Yeah. So it's more the rhetorical...
It's a device.
Yeah, the rhetorical impact of it is more to, like you say, denigrate the opponent, say they're not well thought through people, they're not worthy of taking seriously.
Yeah, they're not acceptable people.
Yeah, they're on the out. So it's really a way of labeling outsiders.
I think it has been deployed that way, and often people who hold conspiracy theories, the 9/11 truthers, as they called themselves, they were outsiders in many ways. So it's an interesting situation where there's a mixture of I suppose intent. But also there's an intent to delegitimize, but in some cases that's actually correct conclusion. But it's also it's like a weaponization of a stance, for example. Yeah.
So in your column you talk about the conspiracy theory. So there's a layer added onto this. So help me understand that.
Yeah, that's when someone says, "Oh, you're doing some bad thinking." Only the facts don't support that. Okay. So it's like, and the example is, you may recall during the Olympic opening ceremonies, there was a deliberate reference to the Last Supper in some of a segment of the performance, and naturally there was Christian outrage. The Last Supper is one of the most holy moments in the life of Jesus Christ. The Last Supper with his disciples before his crucifixion.
The institution of like the communion, the Eucharist, all those things that Christians hold dear, central to their worship experience.
And as the Catholic apologist Bishop Barron said, Christians were outraged because it was intended that they would be outraged. And yet there was this sort of counter, I suppose, backlash. It's like, oh, you guys were seeing the wrong thing. It wasn't about the Last Supper. It was about a 17th century Dutch painting that no one had ever heard of before.
So the kind of the "don't believe your lying eyes" sort of phrase.
Yeah. So, and what was fascinating about, I mean, as I got into this column, I suspect both images, Leonardo da Vinci's Last Supper, and of course that's based on the biblical narrative of the Last Supper, and the Dutch painting were probably in the creator's mind. So it's sort of like a both-and situation. But when it became too heated, it was like, oh, all of the Christians are getting outraged. We need to sort of separate ourselves from this. No, it was about this painting.
We're going to pivot to this more minor influence and say it's about that. So we're going to label we're going to kind of create a conspiracy theory that they have a conspiracy theory.
They're seeing the wrong thing once again. And it was called by one commentator a moral panic, and reflected the anti-cultural, anti-historical, anti-intellectual views of conservative Christians. The only problem with this was the facts.
That's the problem with any conspiracy theory, isn't it?
And that's how you are able to assess it. The problem is that one of the performers in the segment actually posted on her social media, made religious references deliberately, and then suddenly that was deleted. She went back on message about the Dutch painting. Also, the Olympics gave a statement to the New York Post saying that, yes, we did reference the Last Supper. And that's as many people and commentators have throughout history. Okay, so which version of the truth do you want? But it was really what was fascinating for me was that those wrong-thinking Christians. They were
anti-intellectual was the key phrase in that. Right? These guys aren't thinking.
Yeah, these guys aren't thinking. They're feeling, well, what about what's being done, performed by the Olympics, who want to sort of navigate their way out of it.
So, what can we take away from the conspiracy theory?
Well, when you hear that someone is intellectually lazy, only reacting, is generally, but this is the kind of thing this group does. Do some digging, and look. You may find that those conclusions are borne out, but you may also find that half truths, as we saw with the narratives about the competing paintings, Last Supper and the Dutch painting. Actually, those half truths have been weaponized. So always seek the truth, Jace. It may even set you free.
I think I heard that somewhere. Yeah. Thanks for being with us, Tim. Lots of insight and lots of good things to think about.
Thank you. As the culture wars deepen, a particular gambit has emerged. Call it the conspiracy theory. By this, I mean the incorrect charge that a particular assertion is actually a conspiracy theory or weak thinking. Such was the tone of many responses to Christian outrage at the quote-unquote satire of the Last Supper in the Olympics opening ceremony recently. For the handful of you who missed it, the segment, which strongly referenced Leonardo da Vinci's painting The Last Supper, and thus the actual Last Supper before Jesus Christ's crucifixion, it featured drag queens and some bloke in blue as pagan deity Dionysus. Cue. A very natural reaction to the mockery of a sacred moment. Catholic apologist Bishop Barron noted, Christians were offended because it was offensive, and it was intended to be offensive. The response? Outrage about the outrage, plus conspiracy theorists. No, these commentators insisted, you're wrong. The Last Supper wasn't being trammeled. It was actually about an otherwise little-known painting by a Dutch artist named Feast of the Gods. The real issue here, it's culture, not faith. Religious studies professor Anthea Butler, writing for MSNBC, labelled it a moral panic, adding, the fact that Christians immediately identified the scene as being the Last Supper suggests an intellectual simplicity and a knee-jerk reaction. She continued, not understanding the allusions has coincided with conservative Christians' ignorance of art, culture, history, and society. The sole problem with this well-wrought judgment and drag-splaining is the facts. The tableau in the Olympic opening ceremony was clearly about religion, as Christian critics had averred. Even those performing in the piece knew this. French DJ Barbara Butch, who played a central role in the segment, proclaimed as much on her social media. She displayed an image of the Last Supper and a collage of the ceremony, calling it the New Gay Testament, quote-unquote. Later, Butch deleted this post, got back on message, and referred to the Dutch painting. The Olympics offered conflicting explanations, mentioning the Dutch painting in some statements, but also telling the New York Post that the segment's maker, quote, took inspiration from Leonardo da Vinci's famous Last Supper painting to create the setting, close quote. Now, perhaps both images were referenced, complicating the narrative for them. These reactive attacks on this Christian quote-unquote conspiracy are telling. They seek to suppress an emotion now deemed a heresy in our post-faith age, anger at blasphemy. Ironically, the words conspiracy and heresy are, according to one philosophy lecturer, used to stigmatize and marginalize people who have beliefs that conflict with officially sanctioned or orthodox beliefs of the time and place in question. But you already know this. Our times and our cultural establishment now oppose religious faith rather than merely being neutral on the matter. Moreover, different rules apply to offending invalid rather than valid victims. As has been shown, half-truths are duly weaponized. Let the conspiracy Olympics begin. No thanks. The next time you're told that Christians, or indeed any other heretics, political or otherwise, got something wrong because they're thick, lazy, reactive, or misguided, please do a little digging yourself. The whole truth will set you free.
Thanks for listening to the Maxim Institute podcast. If you'd like to hear more from us and keep up with the rest of our research and analysis of politics and policy in New Zealand, you can sign up on the homepage of our website to get our monthly forum email and invitations to future Maxim Institute events. You can search and subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you get your podcasts. From the team at Maxim, mā te wā, goodbye for now.